Hey everyone, this is Joey with Last Few Spins. So just a few days ago, I went to the theater and saw the new Bob Dylan movie, A Complete Unknown. And after watching that, I felt kind of inspired to make a video about him in some way. I've been a fan of Bob Dylan for a few years now. A couple years ago, I went through his discography and listened to all of his albums, at least a couple times each. And then I saw him perform live in Indianapolis in October of 2023. But today we're going to be talking about some of my favorite deep cuts of Bob Dylan's that maybe only the die-hard Dylan fans will know. But some of them may be considered borderline, whether they're a deep cut or not. All I know is nothing on this list has ever cracked the top 100 on Billboard's charts. Even if some of them have kind of a classic feel to them and seem like they are popular, none of these songs ever charted. Speaking of the Billboard charts, oddly enough, Bob Dylan never had a song reach number 1. But did have 4 songs within the top 10 in his career, and just 23 tracks made an appearance on the Hot 100. So without further ado, the first song that I'd like to talk about is perhaps one of the most immersive sounding tracks that Bob Dylan ever recorded. It's from the 1989 Oh Mercy release, and the song is called Most of the Time.
Most of the time, I'm halfway content.
The bass plays a prominent role in this one to drive us forward through the track at a consistent clip, while Bob only slightly lets us in on his true feelings while getting over a lost love. Within the lyrics, he's giving us reasons why he says he's not bothered by the things that he is missing. Although the way he writes the song, you can tell these things do bother him, and with the way he paints that portrait, it's certainly relatable to those of us that may have went through something like that in our own personal lives. Just an excellent track on an album that tends to get overlooked too much. For those who are the harshest critics of Bob Dylan's voice, this next track finds him at his most Dylan-est. A nearly 8-minute track from the album Blood on the Tracks, Idiot Wind. While the lyrics have somewhat of a harsh, venomous feel to them, it's cloaked under what is otherwise kind of a funny presentation within the long drawn-out usage of the phrase idiot wind. Couple that with one of his strongest harmonica performances and you're left with a track that is quite unique. Not unique compared to himself, but unique compared to other artists within that generation. Sometimes Satan comes as a man of peace. Wise words from Mr. Dylan that are repeated in the 1983 Infidels track, Man of Peace. Musically, an easy, bright little rhythm is the setting for this cautionary tale where Bob lets us in on the secret that sometimes the person you think is heaven sent is actually someone that may end up taking advantage of you. Not always, but this song is essentially rooted in skepticism towards those who may seem a little too good to be true. This track is from a Bob Dylan era that isn't talked about too often in terms of the 80s, but Infidels is actually my second favorite Bob Dylan album. Believe it or not. That might not crack the top 5 or 10 on other Bob Dylan fans' lists, but something about it just really draws me to it. So the next 2 tracks on our list may challenge that deep cut criteria as they're on one of Bob Dylan's more traditionally classic albums. From the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan album released in 1963, Oxford Town and Honey Just Allow Me One More Chance are 2 deep cuts that I feel solidify the album and propels it to being a 5-star perfect album.
Oxford town, everybody's got their heads bowed down. Sun don't shine above the ground, it ain't going down to hot.
Both of these songs are short, but are sort of positioned around longer songs, so in terms of their role in the album as a whole, there are a couple easy to digest tracks sonically. Oxford Town was very topical and of the times in terms of the protests regarding the civil rights movement in the 60s, so certainly some potent lyrics there. Honey Just Allow Me One More Chance has a similar feel to it, but it's more about him trying to get back in the good graces of a lady friend that he might have done wrong.
Just a one kind favor I'll ask you, allow me just a one more chance.
I definitely get the feeling, not only from the film, but also his lyrics, that he's the type that maybe drove away some women with his behavior back then, but he definitely had a way of getting them back, and it's because of little ditties like this. So as we reach the halfway point of this video, I invite you to take a second to subscribe to Last Few Spins, and then we won't be ranked strangers anymore. So I can't tell if that was a cringe segue into the next song or brilliant, but regardless, this next track can be found on the 1988 album Down in the Groove. This one's called Ranked Strangers to Me.
I found they were all ranked strangers to me.
This song is actually a cover, and this album is kind of hated on for one reason or another, so I might be in the minority when it comes to those who think Down in the Groove is pretty solid. This track in particular houses some of my favorite Dylan vocals. As in the chorus, he really opens up, and there's a bit of a layering effect that makes his voice sound strong and full. And it kind of sounds like the type of song that would be played in a smoky bar, and I really like that quality about it. So at some point, Bob Dylan went through a bit of a Christianity stage, and he released a trilogy of albums that would have kind of a more religious theme to the lyrics. 1981's Shot of Love had the following track that kind of went way harder than it probably should have. It kind of comes out of nowhere in this era, but the title of this song is Property of Jesus.
You got something that you got a heart of stone.
So while I don't really consider myself to be religious, I can appreciate the sentiment of these lyrics as he calls out those who resent others who attach their faith to Jesus. And more specifically, he has a central character within this track that is the focal point of who is getting picked on. But according to Bob, this fella has the last laugh. So whether that resonates with the listener or not, it's just a very well-written song within his catalog. And like I said earlier, the vibe of this one goes kind of hard, not gonna lie. So this next track is another one of his earlier works, being featured on the 1966 album Blonde on Blonde. And it's certainly memorable in many different ways. I'm talking about One of Us Must Know.
Sooner or later, one of us must know that you just did what you're supposed.
Sooner or later, you must have known this is going to appear on this list. This was one that is kind of borderline in terms of if it's a deep cut or not. It hit 119 on Billboard's Bubbling Under 100 chart, so it was certainly on the radar somewhere, but still not a Dylan track that I hear much about. So the combination of the organ, piano, and his harmonica leaves us with one of the best arrangements in his entire catalog. Then when you have Bob Dylan coming in with some strong Dylanisms over the top, you're left with a song that's certainly fun to crank up loud in the car and sing along. So we're sticking with Blonde on Blonde for the next track. This time we find ourselves stuck in Mobile with the Memphis Blues again.
To be stuck inside of Mobile with the Memphis Blues again.
A bit of an upbeat feel to this one, as Bob tells a fairly lengthy story about some bizarre characters. The interpretation of the lyrics can go many different ways. To be honest, I can't really place my finger on what's going on here, but this song may be best listened to in terms of just vibing with the music, and then of course the infectious way he eventually circles back around to the stuck inside of Mobile with the Memphis Blues again line. So that's one that kind of feels like a classic, even though it's not technically a hit. Maybe it's a deep cut, maybe not. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes because a lot of these songs I've heard so many times that I don't know what was popular and what wasn't. But regardless, those were two tracks from Blonde on Blonde that I really love and wanted to include on this list. So the last song on this list is the only one that was a title track within this video, and I'm talking about the 1990 release Under the Red Sky. So this one actually features George Harrison on the slide guitar, which I was not aware of until doing a little research into this one. The drum beat is literally the most basic beat you can think of, but the way it's produced and is played has such a consistently progressing feel to it that it really propels the song forward, and it's a groove that I could find myself listening to over and over. Bob Dylan's vocals are starting to show a little age at this point in 1990, so you really have to like that quality of his voice to like the song overall, but Under the Red Sky is certainly a hidden gem that was within an album that was overall just kind of overlooked. Alright, so that was 10 of Bob Dylan's deep cuts that I consider to be just as good as some of his classic hits. As he has released hundreds of songs at this point, I'm sure that you were watching this video and you had some in mind that you were probably hoping that I would say. If there are ones that I didn't cover, please leave them in the comments, as I'm sure there are many other hidden gems out there that I missed. I'd love to refresh myself on some of those lesser known Bob Dylan songs that may have slipped through. So that about wraps it up for this video. If you enjoyed this content, I'd definitely appreciate it if you liked the video and subscribed. If this is the first time you've seen any of my content, I invite you to check out my channel. I've done videos on Lana Del Rey, Pearl Jam, Jeff Buckley, some of my favorite albums from 2024, and a few other things, but definitely have a lot of goals for this year in terms of content that I'd like to put out, and all of your support is definitely appreciated. With that being said, until next time, thanks for watching.